Okay, I think we're good, Nathan? All right, good evening, everyone. I call the December 1, 2021 Planning Commission meeting to order. The main purpose of tonight's meeting is a study session on housekeeping code amendments. Before we move on to the agenda items, I'd like to acknowledge our remote meeting format. As with previous meetings, the commissioners and staff are participating via Zoom. During this Zoom meeting, the chat and question functions are not available for use to ensure compliance with the Open Public Meetings Act. We have public comment agenda item at the beginning of the meeting. This time is for comments on issues not on tonight's agenda. Please limit those comments to 3 minutes. Under Governor Inslee's Proclamation 20-28 regarding open public meetings, this meeting will be held remotely. Public comment will be allowed both in writing and orally. The Imagine Bothell notice there. The Imagine Bothell notice, lost my place, city website and tonight's agenda all provided information to the public for providing comments. People wishing to comment were instructed to notify staff or provide written comments by 3 p.m. today. A call-in number was provided on the meeting agenda for members of the public who wish to listen in live to the meeting. For our phone-in callers during staff presentations, staff will make every effort to specify which materials they are referencing so that everyone can follow along. Those who provided advance notice are able to make comments under the audience comment portion of the meeting. Email was encouraged and will be acknowledged. At this point, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge the attendance of the commissioners. Commissioner Dodd.
Present.
Commissioner Westerbeck. Acknowledged. Commissioner Curd.
Here.
Commissioner Robson.
Here.
Commissioner Alderks.
Present.
And Commissioner Gustafson.
Here.
So all commissioners are present this evening. In addition, senior planners Nathan Lamb and Dave Boyd are in attendance this evening. Lastly, before we begin, I'd like to reiterate some meeting guidelines. For all meeting attendees, please speak clearly and pause frequently. State your name each time before speaking. Mute your microphone when not speaking. And if you are streaming the live video feed, please turn the sound off as there is a delay. For commissioners, at specific breaks in the presentation, I'll be calling on members who wish to speak or ask a question. If you wish to speak, please indicate this by holding up your yellow speaker card or otherwise getting my attention, and I will call on you as I see you. And sometimes scrolling across, that takes a little time. This will avoid the problem of having 2 people speaking at the same time. Identify yourself before you ask a question, make a motion, second a motion, or participate in debate, and please mute your microphone when not speaking. So our first agenda item this evening is public comment. In keeping with Governor Inslee's Emergency Proclamation 20-28 regarding public gatherings and open public meetings, the city has accepted visitor comment in writing as well as accepted sign-up sheets for those who wish to speak at tonight's meeting. Written comments submitted to staff no later than 3 p.m. were forwarded to all commissioners and are part of the record. This is time for items not on tonight's agenda. We have not been forwarded any email. Senior Planner Lamb, is there any member of the public wishing to comment at this time?
No, Mr. Chairman, there's nobody in the attendees room and we hadn't received any comments.
All right, thank you. So seeing no members of the public wishing to comment, we will move on to the next agenda item, which is approval of the minutes. We have before us the minutes of the November 17th meeting. Is there a motion to approve those minutes? Commissioner Curd.
I move to approve the meeting minutes from November 17th.
Is there a second to that motion? Commissioner Dodd.
Second.
Okay, it has been moved and seconded to approve the minutes of the November 17th meeting. Any discussion around those minutes? Seeing none, all in favor of approving the minutes of the November 17th meeting, please indicate so. And looking at the screen, I see all 7 members of the commission, all commissioners raising their hand in approval of the minutes. So those minutes are approved. Thank you all. Next agenda item is new business. Senior Planner Lamb, is there any new business before us?
Not this evening, Mr. Chairman, just the study session tonight.
All right, thank you. So on to our main event here. It is a study session on housekeeping code amendments. Senior planners Lamb and Boyd will be presenting these proposed amendments to us. They've broken them up into several sections, so there will be breaks in the presentation for us to ask questions. They'll be showing the language that's being considered. This is a study session, so we will not be voting to approve these amendments, but Senior Planner Lamb and Senior Planner Boyd are looking for our input as they craft these amendments, which will come back to us later for a public hearing and for approval. So with that, I will turn this over to Senior Planner Lamb to begin leading us through this item.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Sorry about that. So yeah, we have for you tonight a study session on our draft 2021 housekeeping code amendments. There's quite a bit to get through tonight, so we ask that you bear with us. These slides are pretty text heavy, and as I understand it, we're sort of taking a different approach to how we go over our housekeeping amendments with you all. And so this will be a little bit experimental, and we'll hope for the best, and hopefully it works out. So everything that we're going to be talking about tonight was either on our 2021 council approved planning docket, or they are new items that were just had come up over the course of the year that we felt like would be a advantageous time to sort of cross those off of our growing list of housekeeping amendments. And for our audience, we once a year try to do a round of housekeeping. It's really what it sounds like over the course of the years. Certain elements of the code become outdated, language becomes outdated. It doesn't reflect what our current standards are, and for one reason or another, they will need to be changed. And this really is to help make the code clearer and more concise for the general public, and also to make it a little bit easier or simpler, really, for the staff that implements the code on more of a day-to-day basis. And so those are the items we'll talk about. Everything that you'll see is sort of a culmination of the language we're proposing was in consultation with staff in other divisions in community development and other departments. And so that's what we've brought to you today. And as the chairman mentioned, if you would save your questions and comments for the break sections, and we can have that discussion then, and we won't have to wait till the end of the presentation to have those conversations. So the next slide here. So as I mentioned, we had our 2021 planning docket. These are the items that were on it. Some were carried over from previous years. And everything that you see on the left, well, everything that you see was in your packet for this evening, but we've separated everything out on the left that we're proposing to defer to next year because these items simply just require more discussion amongst staff before we feel comfortable changing the language and bringing that in front of you. And due to time constraints, we're really trying to cross as much off our list for this year. And we're already probably going to be bleeding into early next year a little bit after your public hearing and taking these to council. So these will all be discussed next year. Everything on the right is what we'll be going over tonight. These are in no particular order, just starting from one. Pretty straightforward plat requirements for recorded easements and other encumbrances is something staff in our current planning division has raised as having some issues. And so we need to look at that a little bit closer than we had time to this year. Exemptions for structures less than 200 square feet. We've noticed some inconsistencies between our Title 12 zoning chapter and then Title 20 for buildings and construction. And so we'll be looking into that next year. Also, this 800 square foot floor area requirement in Lower Maywood has to do initially with accessory dwelling units and provisions that might prohibit those. And this is actually tied into a much larger issue concerning ADUs in particular, with regard to some recent legislation, which is Senate Bill 5235, I believe. But it's got some requirements for owner occupancy, limitations, and parking provisions and stuff like that. And we need to take a more of a comprehensive approach to looking at how we treat ADUs in Bothell before we make some of these more minor tweaks in the code that are related to bigger issues. So and at this point, that's not even a housekeeping item anymore. So we're going to be looking at that next year. The next one, number 4, just amateur radio regulations in Bothell. That's something we need to discuss further. And then also this last one here, number 5, we're proposing to expunge this item off the list because with discussion that we've had with our emergency fire department is no longer an issue. It was apparently an issue in previous years, but it is no longer an issue. So we're requesting to move that from our list. Okay, so in addition to those 6 items that we saw on the right that we'll be talking about tonight, these are our new items that we're proposing for you all, and would like to scratch off our list, as I keep saying. The first has to do with quasi-judicial public hearings. This one, because of the title that it's in, actually doesn't have to do. It's not in the Planning Commission purview, but for courtesy, we're bringing that to you tonight to look at, as it'll be included in the final ordinance. The next one is land use actions in a table that we have in Title 11 that we'd like to just clean up a little bit. Next one is wireless communication facilities. The next one is signage. Next one has to do with the Shelton View sub-area regulations. The second to last here is development regulations for parcels that are within the Canyon Park sub-area but outside of the regional growth center. And then the last one here is related to reasonable use applications. Okay, and then finally, before we dive in, these are the affected titles that we're talking about tonight. Again, Title 2, not really in our purview, but just bringing that forward. And then Title 11, Administration of Development Regulations. And as you can guess, most of our items are in zoning. And then we do have 2 items in the environment title of the Bothell Municipal Code. For our audience, when we look at these revisions, when we make the revisions, we always show new language as underlined, and then we show any language that we're proposing to delete, we strike through. We show our skip sections with 3 asterisks, and any other provision in the code within these sections that we're not touching remains unchanged and in full force.
Senior Planner Lamb, you drop in and out occasionally with your audio. I'm not sure. Yeah, I see some nodding heads. So
Okay.
Not sure what's happening.
Let me see if I can change that. Can you still hear me now?
Yes,
Or
I can hear you
me
now.
Okay, is that a little bit better?
I think so. We'll see if we can keep it up.
Okay. Okay, so our first item tonight. So this is how it was shown in your packet. But upon further consideration in strategic planning, the revision that we're proposing to make would actually look like this. We want to strike both of these sections, A and B. So apologies for any confusion as we get started here. So this is how it was shown, and this is what we're proposing. This is some very old language that has just been left in the code that evidently the city has made a couple attempts at trying to get rid of, but for whatever reason didn't follow through and is still there. There's been issues in the permitting review process where some of this particular language in here is causing some confusion for applicants. And so it really needs to be removed. And the reason why we are proposing both to strike both sections is because B is directly related to A. This is talking about city council being able to refer new permits and applications for approvals in Title 15 and 12 to Planning Commission in Section A, and then Planning Commission then making a recommendation after new development regulations for quasi-judicial permit hearings. And so these are things that don't happen anymore. This has never been used, and we are going to make sure that we consult with our city attorney's office to make sure that we are finally okay to strike all of this before we put it in the final ordinance. So that's the first item. The second item has to do with some redundancies in Title 11 for where we provide our definitions for reference in the development regulations, mostly in Title 12 for zoning. Okay, so in under C, we have two definitions. We have one for building coverage, and then we have one for coverage hard surface. And then in H, we have a hard surface definition. And so after talking with our current planning division, it would be much simpler to just have all of these covered by the impervious surface definition. That's under I. It's more of a thorough definition and covers those. There's no reason for them to be in there and cause confusion when we could use one. In addition, this is more consistent with what Public Works uses in their development review, and also what other jurisdictions use across the region. So that's why we are striking those. And what we haven't shown here is all the references in Title 12. There's dozens and dozens of them. And so for time and simplicity's sake, we haven't shown those, but those would technically need to be in the final ordinance. And we're literally just going to go through and strike all of the hard surfaces to impervious and change it to impervious surface. Okay, the next item here is again in Title 11. This is our land use actions by type table. We are cleaning it up a little bit. There's three revisions. The first one is removing temporary occupancy permits for commercial and multifamily buildings. Those aren't a thing. They don't exist. They've really been replaced by phased occupancy permits. And before we come back to you in a public hearing setting, we're just going to double check this with our buildings department and make sure that we don't need to include phased occupancy permits in place for temporary occupancy permits here. We add the eligible facilities request in this type 1 column as well. And then this language that you see on the bottom right with the asterisks, we're striking that. That's actually related to that first amendment that we looked at. That's no longer used and is not applicable. This table also, as shown, if you go to the website and look at this table on our code, it's just the formatting is not user friendly, and so we've reformatted that a bit to be more user friendly. Okay, last one before our first break here. This is pretty straightforward. This just changes and adds language to clarify when a wireless communication facility permit would not be required. Apparently there was some confusion of when it would be, and so this is really administrative and makes things.
You have dropped off again on the audio.
Community development. Okay, and so with that, we'll take our first break. And I can stop sharing my screen at your request, Mr. Chairman, or I can just leave it up. Be ready to
I suspect let's leave it up, because if there are questions, there will be around what you presented. Now, just a more general question. When these do come back for the hearing, we will see the full language, correct? Yeah, didn't hear you there either. Oh, you're muted though. You're muted.
That's correct.
All right, thank you. So commissioners, questions or comments on what we have seen thus far? I'm not surprised, Commissioner Curd, and I could bet I can guess which section too.
Thank you. Thanks for the presentation. My question is about removing the quasi-judicial role of the Planning Commission. I'm wondering if there are other definitions that would need to be changed in that or other sections, because, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think these elements are the only quasi-judicial role that this commission has. Otherwise, it would just be an advisory body, right? And so there may be other definitions in the code that would need to be edited if this is removed.
Yeah, I'll take first stab on that, and then I'm going to lean on Dave here. I think there's other. We didn't reference that in your report, and that would have been helpful. But there's other places in the code that I think describe the role of the Planning Commission more comprehensively, and I want to say it's in. We have a table in Title 11 for code amendments and development regulation amendments, and it goes by title for what amendments are in the Planning Commission's purview. And so if there are references to this specific language where we don't use these provisions, then yeah, we'd certainly need to strike those. And I hope I followed your question correctly there, and I'll pass it to Dave to help out.
Yeah. So Planning Commission hasn't had a quasi-judicial role since I've been here. I came to Bothell in 2005. So essentially that's what we're doing here. We're removing a reference that didn't get caught when that function was removed. And it probably didn't get caught because we don't typically deal with Title II. But yeah, with all of these, where we're removing language that could be referenced elsewhere in the code, we'll, before we bring the final language back, we'll make sure to do a full search to ensure that we're getting all of those references. You're muted, Chairman Hernan.
Sorry, Commissioner Westerbeck.
Thank you, Chairman. Comment, not question. I deal with impervious surface a lot, and I just want to say thank you, because almost every other jurisdiction says impervious surface. That's what I've been using for most of my work for almost 20 years, and Bothell does hard surfaces. So it's a welcome change. I don't have to be thinking two different minds about when I work in Bothell. So I appreciate that, cleaning that up. I think that's a good move. That was just what I wanted to say mainly. And it's going to be a lot easier to deal with not having the different definitions like you've shown in the packet.
Thank you. That's good to confirm that, and we'll certainly pass that to staff that we work with too in current planning. Thanks.
All right, other commissioner questions or comments, clarifications? Seeing none. I scrolled back and forth twice. So, Commissioner Gustafson.
Thank you, Chair Kiernan, and thank you, Senior Planner Lamb, for leading us through these important but often very technical changes. I am curious about the Lower Maywood changes that we're deferring. It makes sense that we're deferring them till next year. I'd like to know more about the package of other changes that we might see associated with this change, and perhaps when next year we might see it.
If I may, I will take that. The issue that came up really was a case where a property owner wanted to build a detached ADU, which currently our code limits to 800 square feet or less in the Lower Maywood area, but they wanted to keep open the possibility of subdividing it and having that detached ADU become a primary residence in the future. And that's where we realized the potential conflict with the requirement that residences in that area be greater than 800 square feet. And one reason we deferred it is, well, one was a feeling that it really wasn't a housekeeping amendment, it was more substantive. And that we are also in the docket are some changes, potential changes to our ADU regulations. And so we thought it would make sense to defer it and tackle it with that effort. I'd also note that there's nowhere else in the city where we have a minimum size for a single family residence. So it's a little bit odd that it exists in Lower Maywood, where we have other provisions that allow for smaller lot sizes. So we have allow smaller lot sizes and setbacks, but require a minimum residence size. The building code has provisions for minimum sizes for certain rooms, kitchens, and other rooms, and so we feel that those reference that's enough, and there really isn't a need for the minimum size for a single family home. But we did want to do a little more research and then wrap that up into the ADU amendments.
Commissioner Dodd, did you have your hand up?
I did. I was going to ask about kind of the history of this requirement that seems special to Lower Maywood, but I don't know that that's really the purpose of what we're doing here. So maybe I'll just save that for when it comes up.
Yes, it will be back to us. Other Commissioner Gustafson.
Thank you, Chair Kiernan. I do understand my question might be outside the scope of the current discussion. My concern is for that one homeowner, if they have to wait half a year to get a decision, might that prevent them from taking advantage of something and being able to have the flexibility to create that unit?
My understanding, I haven't dealt with that homeowner, but my understanding is this came up just as a kind of a what if scenario, nothing that they are necessarily looking to do imminently.
Okay, that makes perfect sense. Thank you.
Any other commissioner comments or questions? All right. So Senior Planner Lamb, want to lead us through the next section?
Yep, get caught up here. Okay, going into Title 12. The first one we have has to do with setback requirements for HVAC and similar pad-mounted equipment. There are instances when lot lines may be too close to each other, and it's just, you just simply can't achieve this 5-foot requirement. And we had some consultation with the fire department because there is a minimum standard, which we found to be 36 inches. And so we're simply just changing that here. We're adding pad mounted, just to clarify that it's for, it's not just HVAC, it's similar equipment. And so that's really just something that's going to help our current planners when they go to implement these provisions during development review. And so that's that one. Moving on to the next one, exterior lighting requirements in section 12.14. There, we just needed to provide some clarification for what lighting would, what requirements would be applicable to different types of lighting. And there's an exemption section for those regulations for lighting. And we've just consulted with our public works department, and
You've faded again.
Fading out. Okay. And I'll just speak a little bit louder. Our public works department has helped us with this one here. And this is a little more consistent with their design and construction manual. And so again, another administrative amendment here that will make things a little bit easier for staff. Okay, this is another section that just has some really old code for permanent off-premises non-commercial signage. There's no such thing as a public improvement department with the city. And so we're just simply changing that to community development. Pretty straightforward. This one here is some more. So back in 2015, there were certain blocks of the Shelton View sub area that were added, the zones were moved up to Canyon Park and changed to residential. And so we no longer have residential activity center and CB zones in this sub area anymore. There's only one small portion of the sub area that has office professional zoning. And so we're just simply striking those out of the title. So that one is also very straightforward. And then here we are again at a break. So if there's any comments or questions, I did go over those pretty quickly. And I think Dave's got the next section. So before I dish it off to him, take any questions and comments.
All right, commissioners, questions, comments, need for clarification? Scanning back and forth. Perhaps more informational on my part. Not sure how much of a difference it would make, but is there a noise issue with those pad mounted units on the property line? 36 inches is kind of close. I mean, I know not that much of a difference from 5 feet, but how is that managed?
Well, that's a good question, and to be honest, we didn't ask about that sort of, I guess. I mean, that is it could be a nuisance, and so I think what I'd like to do is go back and ask our staff if they regularly receive complaints about particularly older equipment that's very close to adjacent residences and buildings, and we could certainly, if it is an issue, think about a workaround. We really only took that fire and emergency standard into consideration, and that's why we reduced it to 3 feet. And in particular, where 5 feet can be hard to achieve in some instances. So,
thank you. And again, I'm not sure that the 24-inch difference is going to matter as far as noise. It's just an interest. But so I see Commissioner Westerbeck and then Commissioner Kurd seeking to speak.
Thank you, Chair Kiernan. I can speak to that just briefly. I've had to deal with this a lot doing architecture work, and the City of Kirkland actually has a whole section of code or lines of code about how quiet the equipment has to be if it's within 5 feet. And actually, I've done it within 3 feet too. And we actually had to provide that from the manufacturer. You guys, as most of you probably know, these are really, really quiet. Now all the new equipment's almost silent. So we've never failed to be able to produce equipment that was quiet. One thing that's just a little outside the box thinking, and I don't want us to have to renegotiate the code tonight, but just something to think about. We don't allow this equipment in the front setback, and maybe we should, because usually if it's in the front, it's not going to bother the neighbors as much. Maybe we could say it could be in the front, within 3 feet of the house or something, as long as it's screened, because we allow screening on the sides. So it's just something to think about for the future, because it's probably not going to bother neighbors as much, even if it was quite a bit noisy, which it's really not anymore. Just something to think about. Also, as when these are retrofit to buildings and homes, sometimes it's really hard to find the exact place to put them. And so, granted, we have pretty large setbacks in Bothell, but sometimes you've got these long runs for the lines that supply the refrigeration liquid to the head within the building. And sometimes a front setback would be a really great place to put one. So maybe we can think about that eventually, especially as we allow more, buildings on a site over time. So something to think about. And I agree, Chair Kiernan, 24 inches probably wouldn't matter much, especially with how quiet these are. Thank you.
All right, Commissioner Kurd and then Commissioner Alderks.
Thanks. Thanks for this next section. One question that I have is around the exterior lighting section 12-14-240. My question is about some feedback that I received from lots of people. I guess last year or maybe 2 years ago, after the holiday market downtown in December, some aesthetic lighting was left up on Festival Street. And then also this past year during Diwali downtown, there's a lot of aesthetic lighting that's in the right of way that just people love. And they're so excited about all that stuff. And I'm wondering if from a code interpretation standpoint, if that that aesthetic lighting intended solely for roadway and sidewalk illumination, if that creates somewhat of a difficulty in interpretation, whether something is aesthetic or if it's intended for illumination. I don't know. Is that relatively clear, or would these types of festival or aesthetic lighting fall into this exemption or not?
That is a good question. I'll have to, before we come back for public hearing, I will follow up with Public Works and see how they treat that, because that's not something that we looked into. So appreciate the comment, and yeah, we'll have some feedback for you.
Great.
Unless Dave might know something out of their design manual or something that a standard that they apply.
I don't, but I suspect that that wasn't the issue that they were addressing here. I think it was more that not all of our roadway lighting is done by the city. Other agencies provide lighting on roadways. So I think that's what they were tackling here, and it's probably pretty simple to either change or eliminate that added text at the end to allow it to address the more decorative lighting that you're referencing. But yeah, we'll follow up with that.
Thank you.
Well, and I guess to follow on that, this section refers to exemptions. If that sort of aesthetic lighting is not exempted, what would be the requirements for it to be permitted? And you don't need to answer that now, but that would be kind of the follow on to that. Commissioner Alders.
Thank you, Chair. Jenny Alders here. Director Lamb, thank you for this presentation. It's it's necessary and can be dry, but I think you're doing a great job leading us through this process. And my question is back to the setbacks for the HVAC units and the potential of moving to the front. And this is just a clarification. If I understand correctly, commercial units can, Commissioner Westerbeck referenced this, can put units in the front if they're screened and properly, made to look aesthetically pleasing. And is there a reason that we would want to treat residences separately and to a different standard than commercial spaces? And if so, I guess I would just be saying I am curious and interested in pursuing Commissioner Westerbeck's question at least on those grounds.
I'll tag team this one with Dave. It's funny because this has come up recently, and we may be proposing another amendment regarding screening for mechanical equipment, residential and commercial, maybe next year, because it's an issue that's been identified in our development review group. And I don't know that there's any reason to treat it different besides the sheer scale of the equipment. We do have requirements, I know, in commercial for the types of screening and how they have to be aesthetically consistent with the, architecturally and enough to. I can't recall the requirement off the top of my head, but I know we have them. And so, if that's something that the commission wanted to pursue for residential, for allowing them in front yards, and to specifically change what we see in front of us here in number 1, since they're not able to be put in there, then that's another discussion that we'll have to have. And before I pass it off to Dave, I'll just say not listed here is that I believe the equipment in residential is able to be located in the backyard. So I think that's the way out of it if they couldn't meet this requirement before. And so I'll pass it off to Dave. Muted.
All right. I was actually going back and looking deeper into the code. It's not just a difference between residential and commercial. I think for townhomes or row homes, obviously there is no side setback. So I do believe we allow them in the front when screened in that situation. So we'll look into that, both those issues, and I suspect this is just one of the many protections in our code for sort of that character of single-family neighborhoods, which includes front yards free of mechanical equipment and parked cars.
Commissioner Dodd.
Yeah, thank you. I guess my take on this is somewhat similar to Commissioner Aldrich's and Commissioner Westerbeck. I don't necessarily understand why we're regulating this so tightly. I don't know, I guess just being a homeowner who's put in like air conditioning in their house, like I just can't imagine like you finally save up to buy a house in Bothell, which is super expensive. You finally save up to like upgrade your HVAC as needed. And then, something comes in and makes it more challenging to do. Like I can appreciate some of the measures taken as Dave said to protect the character of single family homes, but I just don't want to see us keep things that might feel a little overreachy given the times we live in. So I would really want to think about that when we get back to it. So that's just something as a heads up for our staff. Thank you.
Appreciate the comments. Yeah, we'll when we circle back around, we'll try to look for ways to build in flexibility for different types of design for sure.
I would also add that, so this one was considered sort of housekeeping eligible since we're just tweaking this setback on the side. If we go to allowing them also in front setbacks, that's a little more substantive and perhaps not appropriate as a housekeeping amendment. So that's another thing we'll discuss and bring back with you, back to you next time.
Commissioner Aldrichs.
Thank you, Chair. Jenny Aldrichs here. This is a question for you, Dave. It sounds like we have a couple of options available to us. We could just defer on this one and just say, let's do it later. Or we could do one and then the other. So we could amend this now and then say we would like to defer the next step, which is possibly investigating and then removing the front yard setback, like prohibition. And which would you prefer to do, and how would you guide the commission going forward with that?
Well, I would say that we would recommend going ahead with this. This is something that our development review staff have identified as a problem, and it's an inconsistency with the standards, design standards. So that's why we feel it was suitable to deal with as a housekeeping amendment. And then it wouldn't really be a matter of deferring the other. The other one's really not on the table yet. But the question would be whether it would be appropriate to tackle, probably three options. Maybe there's a decision that, we could address that with these housekeeping amendments. I don't think we're going to go that way, but that is, I suppose, a possibility. The second would be to, if it does seem fitting as a housekeeping amendment, to consider it with the next year's housekeeping code amendments, or if it seems to be more part of a bigger examination of some of our standards for single family, or not, I shouldn't limit it to single family, but for HVAC or other mechanical equipment, maybe that's a whole separate code amendment that would be brought back to you next year, or at least included as an option in the 2022 docket.
Commissioner Westerbeck.
Thank you, Chair Kiernan, Senior Planner Lamb and Boyd. Just a quick note, I absolutely agree this should be done. This is a bit of a hardship. I mean, we have a lot of 5-foot setbacks, and if you can't add space, so you really have to get this 3 feet done. I think it's imperative. And I think if you come back and we look at HVAC or screening requirements in the future, that's not a bad idea. Could be a good use of time. And it could be also that we look at in the future, and this is a bigger package, of course, so maybe a future docket, we look at as a topic, anything in the land use code that is like an aesthetic designation or anything about the character of single family housing. I mean, just re-look at those. Some of those were probably codified 80 years ago. So we may want to someday review those and say, are these appropriate anymore? Or are they just subjective? So just a quick comment, but I would like to see this 3 feet thing done. I think if it can be done as a quick housekeeping item, it's really, really helpful.
Okay, other commissioner questions or comments? So I think you've heard support for moving forward on this, a real interest in addressing the front yard setback issue. If it is not a housekeeping matter, then, pursuing it in another means as possible. And we do have the docket coming before us in January, correct?
Actually, in 2 weeks.
In 2 weeks. Ah, okay. So we'll have an opportunity to suggest things which we believe should be on the docket. So you might all want to ponder that before the next meeting and think about what you might want to put forward. So anything else on this section?
Don't believe
Bouncing
there
back and
is.
forth.
Dave, did you want to run did you want me to stop sharing and you can run your own presentation, or do you want me to scroll through for you?
No, I'll just tell you when I'm ready for you
Okay.
to move forward.
Sounds good.
So the first amendment in this section, we discovered that in the process of retaining some zone designations in existing zone designations within the Canyon Park sub area, but outside of the regional growth center, we also took away some of the more detailed regulations that applied to those zones. And that again is a bigger issue that really isn't a housekeeping issue. At least we don't want to include it with these housekeeping issues. But in the process of investigating that, we've discovered that there were some circular references or some links in this table 1214.030 that don't connect to the right portion of the code. That's really not even a housekeeping. That's just a formatting issue for code publishing to work on. But we also wanted to clarify that as the code stands right now, the development regulations for those areas really are controlled by the commercial designations of those areas. So we wanted to make that more explicitly clear because it's come up and it's a little bit it's not very clear the way it's written now. So for now, as long as unless there's a determination to go back and take a look at restoring some of those development regulations for those areas, we're going to make the code clear to do what it is that the way that it's currently being interpreted. So there's 2 references in this table. It actually, one reason why there's strike through and retention of the same issue in the same code is we merged some cells here. We were able to simplify the table a little bit. So we're striking some of the references in one of the cells and keeping it in another. So next. Oh, this is more of that, and then also in the footnotes for that table, we're adding this. We're just making it explicit that the commercial development regulations apply in these cases in Canyon Park. Okay, next. This goes back to the public space and designated outdoor space amendments that we spent a lot of time on a couple of years ago into last year. Somehow in the process of that, through most of that effort, Planning Commission had determined that projects that requiring less than 1,000 square feet of public space were exempt from public space requirements. And somehow that didn't make it into the final code. It was referenced in the Planning Commission findings and in a lot of the presentations that led up to the final ordinance, but somehow got left out. So that's why we feel that it can be dealt with as a housekeeping amendment, because that was clearly the intent of the Planning Commission, and it didn't. It wasn't that the council said no, we need to take that out. It was presented to council as Planning Commission's recommendation. It just wasn't in the code. The other thing is that we attempted to describe the kind of fairly complicated, somewhat complicated formula that we came up with for public space in a paragraph of text. And it really got a little convoluted, and our development review planners scratched their head over that one and said, isn't there a clearer way to describe this? So we're proposing putting that all into a table. So if they're required to have less than 1,000 square feet, that's exempt. But there are situations where they could be provided through a transfer, as was part of our recommendation and what was adopted. In those spaces that require 1,000 to 3,000 square feet, they can use an in lieu fee for up to 50% of that. And for the portions that require more than 3,000 square feet, it's 10% of that area. So this is all just saying the same thing, but trying to do it in a clearer way. Next. And then related to that, they're in implementing fee in lieu payments. There were some, it wasn't clear exactly when those payments needed to be made, and some of the processing of that was felt needed to be codified. So that's what these three subsections cover. Next. And then when we did the amendments to Title 14, environment section, to the floodplain regulations for critical areas, we I'm sorry. I'm going off on a different tangent. When we changed the short plats from 4 to 9 lots, we did not change the categorical exemptions, the threshold for categorical exemptions to match that, and it's always matched that short plat threshold. So it's actually something that we discovered very late in the process, and it was determined that we should just go ahead and move forward with what was before the council, and then come back and make this change as a housekeeping change. Next. And this is one that I didn't work on, so jump in, Nathan, if you want. But this is something that our development review staff determined was another provision that should have been removed with previous code amendments and no longer applies. Okay.
Yep, and we did talk about this a little bit with our director, and yeah, it's all administrative. This is very old language, just left over in the code that didn't get stricken. So, yep.
I think
that's
the last. Yeah.
Yep. Alluded to this at the beginning and talked about it over for some of those items. So we appreciate the feedback, and we'll circle back around with the staff and have discussion and make any necessary changes and incorporate all of your feedback that way and bring that back to you January 19th for a public hearing. And at that point, we want your recommendation to be able to forward to City Council to get those adopted before moving on to our official 2022 list.
All right, before we move off, yeah, any comments on that last batch of items that was presented? I think it was pretty straightforward, but I do want to ask that. Commissioner Curd and then Commissioner Alderks.
Thanks, and thanks for that presentation. Dave, I have a clarifying question about the new table that you've included in 1264-304. Okay, correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought that we were exempting some of the required public space less than 1,000 square feet totally. But this is reading, and the comments are reading that we're exempting the use of in lieu fee for less than 1,000 square feet. Is that right? I forget. It was so long ago.
We need to clarify that further, but so yes, they are exempt, but the only other qualifying language is that a project that requires less than 1,000 square feet can still provide public space as transfer from another property.
Okay, great. Thanks for that clarification. Yeah, maybe there's another couple words in there, or removal of use of in lieu fee. I don't know. You can work some magic on that and make it really clear, but that was just a mistake that I had. Thank you.
Okay.
Maybe even just a period and separating the exempt from then it may be provided otherwise.
Yeah. Okay.
Commissioner Alderks.
Thank you, Chair. Jenny Alderks here. To add to your last point, Chair, in lieu fee, sorry, I'm going to get like English technical on you. That's a prepositional opener, but what you're actually referring to is the in lieu fee as a subject object. And so you might want to say an in lieu fee may be provided. I will defer to you on that, but sorry, you just got my like English teacher brain on for a second. Next is, I just want to say that I appreciate, this is a comment, not a question, but I just really appreciate seeing that a policy that we implemented, that we voted on and is now getting into the code, and we are now cleaning up the code to reflect the change from 4 units to 9 units. And it was a pleasure to be a part of the process where was initially part of the beginning of it when this first came to the Planning Commission, and now here we are at the end of this year, getting around to cleaning up the code. So just thanks for having me along for the ride.
All right, other commissioner questions or comments? One of the more general questions you asked Senior Planner Lamb was about the use of this process as opposed to how we have previously done it. And I think this worked pretty well. So, thank you and congratulations on trying something new. I see some smiles and nods, so I think the commission appreciates your efforts here. So thank you.
Great, thanks.
So unless there are any other comments, I think that finishes our study session on housekeeping amendments. Is there any interest in a break or just powering through? I don't think we have too much more. Not seeing any indication one way or the other. So then let's proceed. Unfinished business. Senior Planner Lamb, do we have unfinished business before us?
I don't believe we do, but would defer to Senior Planner Boyd since he had a couple items at the last meeting.
I guess we could treat it as unfinished business. We established since the last meeting that the missing middle walking tour would be 1 to 3 p.m. on December 18th. And that also means that we no longer have a backup date because that was originally thought of as a backup date. But and my thought is that at that point, if we get if the weather cancels, we're probably looking at sometime in early January. So we can think about that between now and the next meeting on the 15th, and try to settle on a backup date then. So maybe everybody check their calendars, and we'll either do something via email or settle on that on the 15th.
Well, we'll even be within a few days of then for the next meeting, and weather forecasts might, to the extent we can rely on them, tell us a little bit. So keep that all in mind, look at the forecasts and prepare your rain gear. So seeing no other unfinished business, are there reports from staff for us?
I have one report. We got a request from our finance department to get a planning commissioner volunteer to be on the capital facilities plan committee. They're going to be starting to work on a new 6-year capital facilities plan to cover 2023 through 2029, I believe, maybe 28. In February, it'll be a commitment of 4 to 7 meetings between February and October. I'm not, and I can send a little more detail about that. One thing I don't know is if they have any projected schedule for those meetings, whether they're, I think in the past, some of them have been during working hours. So that might be a factor for some of you. So I just wanted to give you all a heads up that that's coming up. I will send some more information. They want to have somebody assigned to that by January 19th. So we have a little bit of time, but I did want to bring that up for you to think about.
All right. Yeah, 6-year capital facilities plans are very important. If things are not in them, it's harder to add them. If they are in there, you got a much better chance of getting something done. So if you're interested, I guess we can talk about it in the next meeting or two. And if there are more than one interested, we'll have to think about how to manage that. But it's a good opportunity. Any other reports from staff?
Director Cotterman did want us to mention for the commission to consider maybe going into the next meeting, canceling the January 5th meeting in the new year, just because a lot of folks are going to be out on vacation, and it might be better to just hold the one meeting on the 19th instead. So probably at the next meeting, deliberate about that.
Okay, we can talk about that then. And I want to share where Director Cotterman is tonight. It is of interest to the commission.
Yeah, he's at the Snohomish County Planning directors meeting. Working on coordination towards the next round, the upcoming comprehensive plan update.
So important meeting for him to be at. Good. All right. So any other reports from staff? Seeing none, reports from members. I'm looking. All right. Well, I guess there are no reports from members at this meeting. Anyone want to talk about your walk or? Come on. Commissioner Curd.
Okay, I'll talk. You got me. So the walk went well. It was on Saturday after Thanksgiving. A good showing from the community, and it didn't even rain that much, I don't think. And so I hope everyone who came from the commission and also just from the community got a lot out of it, and encourage everyone to continue to use our public open spaces and our parks. So thanks to the Parks Department for managing such a great resource.
Thank you. Sorry I missed that one. Our new grandchild was just a couple of days old and couldn't make it.
I'm sure there will be walks in the future too. So
Yes. All right. Any other reports from members? Seeing none. There being no further business, is there a motion to adjourn? Commissioner Alders.
I motion to adjourn.
Okay, it has been moved that we adjourn. Is there a second?
I'll second the motion to adjourn.
Commissioner Westerbeck, it has been moved and seconded. All in favor of adjourning, please indicate. And I see unanimous consent for adjourning. So we will adjourn this evening's meeting at 7:12. Our next meeting will be December 15th. Look forward to seeing you all then. Have a good night, everyone.
Thank you. Congratulations,
Thank you.
Chair, on your.
Everyone.
I won't flash the picture, but next time I see you, you can ask.
Yes. Okay, take care.
Yes, please.
All right, goodbye.
Good night, everyone.
Night.
Right.